Hello. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. This is episode 7, and we're going to be focusing on parenting a child with mental health challenges. Our guest is Kate Easton. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the co host of the show. Don Helmrich is my co host. We co host together. That's how that works when you have two hosts, right, Don?
Correct.
Um, and we also try and have a little fun at least. It's a very serious topic. It certainly is easy to get bogged down, but we also can't take ourselves too seriously when we do this. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and my website. We're live on both of our Facebook pages and both of our Instagram accounts. Please like, comment, share, retweet, repost, reply, tag, all the things that you do on social media so that folks might be able to find the show and be part of the discussion. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Don, I would say that every month is Mental Health Awareness Month as far as we're concerned. We launched this show in February to try and raise awareness and reduce the stigma associated with mental health. I'll go back to the beginning in terms of what I shared. I suffer from anxiety and occasional bouts of depression, and I'd never shared that with anyone, much less talked about it on a live stream. Never told anyone I saw a therapist. But after hosting a show with Candice Sanchez last year and talking about mental health, I felt I needed to challenge myself to bring these issues to light and to kind of help people share their stories. I did that. I came up, talked about the idea, and then I called Dawn and said, "Hey, Dawn, would you be a guest on this show that I'm thinking about?" And here she is, a co-host. So sometimes you get more than what you ask for, and you only get that when you ask. And I am forever grateful, Dawn, that you said yes, and that you jumped in with both feet. We've known each other for several years now, going back to our days at United Way. Um, and it means a lot that you're with me twice a month doing this show.
I'm definitely happy to be here. Thank you so much, Neil, for letting me weasel my way into co hosting with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This topic that we're going to be talking about today, parenting a child with mental health challenges, is it cuts very close to home for both you and our guest Kate Easton. We will be you know talking about your stories, the blog posts that you both shared in a little bit. But I want to take a moment and just acknowledge some of the folks who are watching to say hi. Our friend Apollo is watching from Philadelphia. Glad to be here. Apollo, I think, has watched almost every episode. Thank you so much. Apollo is a colleague of mine at Digimentors. Rochelle, my neighbor from Hastings on Hudson, New York, where I grew up where my mom still lives, is actually watching from Seattle today, where I lived for 15 years. Her son moved out to Seattle. So Rochelle, thank you so much for joining us, even though you're traveling and spending time with family. Um, do you want to say hi to this next gentleman, Dawn?
Sure, this is Jim Newberg, and he's lying. He's not from the planet Earth. I promise you that. That is my fiance, and a 7 show watcher of the show, and also a former guest of the
A
show.
former guest, and I should have mentioned that Rochelle is a future guest on the show. She'll be joining us in September. More on that in a little bit later in the show. Uh, my mom is watching from White Plains. So now I made a point of saying that we had 3 people, at least with ties to Hastings on Hudson, or even the same block, Glen Place, where I grew up. My mom lives there. Rochelle lives up the street. But today they're both in different places. I know my mom is actually at a dinner party, and she sent me a message that I'm going to a dinner party. It's a group of friends that she's known for years. But I am going to log on at least and try and watch the show and sneak away a bit. And so I did assure her, Mom, please, I love you watching the show, but say hi
Enjoy
in the
your dinner
beginning.
party.
Enjoy the dinner party. Come, you can say hi in the beginning, and you can watch later. And that's the great thing about this program. You can watch it whenever at your convenience. If you can't watch it live, you can watch it later. If you can only watch part of it, you can come back at your convenience. Here's another person I'd like you to introduce to our viewers, Don.
Yes, this is my wonderful daughter, Brittany, who I have to give a shout out to. She graduates from college on Sunday with her degree in early childhood special education with honors.
With honors.
So that's a major snaps to her. So super proud of her. Very excited for her. So I'm glad that she's joining us for a little bit today.
Absolutely. And I had the pleasure of meeting her when I was in Milwaukee last year. So, Brittany, congratulations and so happy for you. We have Dane watching, Dane Elliott Lewis watching from Massachusetts. I know he watched last week and some earlier episodes, I think, as well. Dane is a former high school classmate of mine. And, it's, I shared the example and I actually get, a little, it's very meaningful, right? I mean, I love it when my mom watches. I love it when Rochelle watches. Our family is behind us. Dana and I were friends in high school. We were on the soccer team, grade above me. We hadn't really kept in touch, but he's been so supportive of this show, talking about mental health and raising awareness. And that means so much to me when someone who I don't have as close of a relationship now with comes out and supports it. So, Dane, thank you so much. It really does mean a lot. Deborah Bernick is watching from Arlington, Virginia, not so far from where I live here in Springfield, Virginia. She's a regular watcher of the Sunday show that I produce, the Sunday New York Times Read Along. She's also a very loyal customer for Emily's Girl Scout cookies every year. So, Deborah, thank you so much. Naomi Service also watches the New York Times Read Along and has been sharing these posts. Thank you so much for sharing your personal experiences. Your voices are important. Watching from the Upper West Side. So thank you for that, Naomi. We have a couple other folks just watching in, and my mom says she's going to watch for longer than expected. So, Mom, thank you, and please thank the folks that you're having dinner with. Um, we have someone watching on LinkedIn. For some reason, the name and picture didn't come through, but I do know I checked. It's Raja Gopalan who's watching. So, Raja, thank you so much for joining us. Pradnya Haldapur is watching from Silver Spring here in the DMV, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. Thank you, Pradnya. And we still want to talk to you about coming on the show. I know that Pradnya wanted to have a more of a conversation around depression in the workplace, which would be a follow up to a great conversation we had earlier in the year. So, with that, again, thank you everyone for joining us. It means so much to have the support from people from various parts of our lives. Um, Please like, comment, share, tag your friends, and sit back and relax because it's going to be a great show. I want to start with you, Don, in terms of sharing a little bit about your story and give a little bit of background there. But before I do that, I do want to acknowledge the support that we have from Digimentors. They support the show on a pro bono basis. Digimentors is where I work. Big shout out to my colleagues, Sri Srinivasan, uh, Linda Bernstein, Jenny Lazarus, Rajni Menon from our leadership staff, leadership team, and then all the other people who we work with who are sharing the show, commenting, and watching. Um, they've given me the time and space and the resources to put this show on twice a month, and I am forever grateful for that. At Digimentors, we do digital marketing, events and digital programs, strategic communications, trainings and workshops. We help with staffing and recruiting. We also amplify events, and we're doing a lot of work around AI, workshops, policy strategy, scenario planning. If you have any questions, if you're interested in any of that kind of work, please let me know. I'd be happy to talk to you about how we might be able to work together. So, with that, Dawn, your blog post focused on your son and your son's struggles. Here is the card, the title: "My Son's Struggle with Social Anxiety and the Difficulty of Getting Help." And you wrote, this isn't a direct quote, but one day my son told me the world was not set up for kids like him, kids that have social anxiety. And if I remember correctly, he was 12 or 13 at the time when he made that pronouncement. And that was gutting for me, that he was so kind of self-aware and so despondent at the same time. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, yeah, that was a really shocking revelation for me. I didn't, my son was very reluctant to join in any type of activities at school. We put him in every kind of sport you could possibly think of. We encouraged him to join clubs. We tried to get him to go to what's called ACAL at school, to have friends over, and he just never wanted to. And we had this misunderstanding that that was because he couldn't make a commitment to something, or he just didn't like to play sports. And what we came to find out was that the reality was that social situations were literally paralyzing for him. And the thing that I talk about was coming home after a couple of weeks of him being in middle school for the first time, and he was literally laying on the floor in his room, curled up in a ball, and he couldn't talk. And I didn't know what was going on, and all I could do was lay down next to him and just like let him know that I was there. And eventually, when he was able to say something, he just literally said, like, the world is not set up for someone like him, who is paralyzed by social situations, and being in a classroom and having to participate and being forced into all of these activities was harming him more than it was helping him. um and in my blog I talk about how I um I thought at the time, like, oh, okay, we'll just not make him do those things and everything will be glorious and fine. But the reality was is that as he got older and entered high school, he started experiencing more than just social anxiety, but depression as well. And it was nearly impossible to get him help. He
Mm,
knew that he needed medication, and we were on a 9-month waiting list for a psychiatrist. And if my daughter's still on here, she knows that there was a real fear that he was gonna harm himself, that something was gonna that it would be too late by the
mm,
time we actually found help for him. And the only thing that saved him and us was that I had really good health insurance and a primary care physician who, because my son was 16, could treat him as if he was an adult and was able to prescribe him some medication to alter that chemical imbalance in his brain. So
sure. So appreciate you sharing that, and I think that it's important to note that you did talk to your son before writing the blog post, before you know putting this out there, and that he was comfortable with that, with you sharing his story, which
yeah,
is
he
says a
encouraged
lot.
me to do it. He really wants to reduce that stigma, because he's fully aware that a lot of us suffer from mental health concerns.
Sure. You mentioned your daughter Brittany. If she's still watching, I want to make sure she sees this message from Apollo, who's watching on my Facebook page. So she wouldn't have seen it. He offers congratulations to her on her graduation. So thank you, Apollo. And then our friend Candace Sanchez is watching for just a little bit, showing her support and love. and she'll be watching the replay. Candace, thank you so much. Candace was the first guest we had on the show. Our first show was just Dawn and I sharing our stories. We always knew that our first guest would be Candace because she is such an integral part to both of our lives and both of our stories. So thank you, Candace. With that, I want to share Kate's blog post. I'm going to tee it up and then I have her join us to talk about it. The title of her post was "When Your Child Struggles with Bipolar, Everyone Struggles," meaning the entire family. Amidst the chaos and the pain, there was a glimmer of clarity. My son was not himself. He was a prisoner of his own mind, controlled by forces beyond his control. Kate, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your story. Um, what a powerful framing. And, I want to just have you talk a little bit more about, what this was like when you realized that your son was really suffering, really struggling with bipolar and, kind of what that eye-opening moment was for you.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be able to tell my story. I haven't told it very often, so I might miss little pieces, but when I have had the opportunity to tell the story, it's just I look back and I'm so proud of where we are now. Okay, so to start out, what I thought I would do is talk a little bit about the day I actually hit rock bottom. I think kind of telling that story a little bit more gives a better understanding of how it affected not only our family, but our friends, and just everybody around us. So this particular day, it was a Sunday, beautiful, 80-degree weather, nice day. I was really looking forward to just spending some time outside with the family and grilling out as a family later on in the evening. However, that day took a pretty sudden and drastic turn. Um, what ended up happening is my son at age 16 left the house. 16-year-olds do that. He left the house and didn't let us know where he was going, who he was going to be with, which can be a 16-year-old behavior. However, I became increasingly worried because this had kind of become a habit for him, and he was leaving the house more and more often, and we weren't able to locate him or have any contact with him, to the point that we were actually filing missing child reports. And that summer alone, we had already filed about 6 missing child reports. So my anxiety was heightened already because of that. But this day ended up being a little bit different because several hours later, my son did show up back at the house. But he was off. Something was wrong. He was very hostile. He was very angry. He was yelling at all of us, very verbally abusive, saying things about us, and I didn't really know what to do as a parent. I kind of let him go up to his room and have his time. I kind of learned from past experiences that trying to talk to him at that moment wasn't going to be the right thing to do. Not asking him where he was, all that kind of stuff. And I guess while he was in his room, what he was actually doing was packing a backpack and planning on leaving, which I did not know. Eventually, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes later, I heard the back door open and close, and I ran out because I didn't know what was going on. Was he leaving again and not telling us? And I was really concerned because he didn't seem safe. He just did not seem like himself. So as a parent, what I did was I approached him and tried to stop him. He had hopped on his bike, and I stood in front of his bike, and I was trying to stop him, which turns out was a really bad move on my part, because he was just in such an altered state. He grabbed me and threw me to the ground. He was kicking me. He was smashing my head. He was verbally abusing me, wrenching my arm, and I was screaming. Luckily, my older son in the house heard what was going on, and he came out and, pulled Matthew off me, and he took off. He took off. So immediately I hopped on my bike. My older son went in the house and told my husband what was going on. My husband then called the police again, who happened to be on speed dial with us about that time. And I was riding around everywhere trying to locate him. I gave up after, 45 minutes or so. I figured he could ride his bike much faster than I could. I went home, and my husband was speaking with the police at that time, getting a description of him, all of that kind of stuff. And they told us to just kind of stay put, stay where we are. They had squads throughout our whole neighborhood and our city, actually, looking for him. So at that moment, you can just imagine the anxiety and panic, and I was scared out of my mind. I I was pacing. I didn't have a clue what to do with myself. After a couple hours of them not being able to locate him, the police called us and asked me to please hop in my car and drive around to places that he frequented to see if maybe we could spot him. They told us not to approach him and call them immediately, but if we could locate him, that would be great. So my husband stayed home to kind of be there in case my son showed up, or to kind of talk to the police. And my older son and I hopped in the car, and we were driving all over. And we ended up going down to our local park where a lot of the kids kind of were hanging out at that time. And the police were down there, and they couldn't locate him because he had actually changed his clothes and changed everything about him. He was really trying to get away, and we kept calling the police and trying to, explain what he was wearing at that moment and see if they could find him. But he slipped away.
And this isn't what he was wearing, but this is just a reference. This is about the age that he was at when all this was happening. Right?
Well, and this is
A little
actually
younger,
more
maybe?
of when we started noticing that there was challenges. So
Okay.
several years later is kind of when I hit that
A
rock
couple years
bottom
later was rock
with
bottom.
him. Yeah. But this
But
is really when we were starting to notice
sure,
that his behavior was maybe a little bit different than we would be expecting
sure.
young teenage behavior to be.
Okay.
So the police then told us, go home, just go home. We're looking for him. We want you to go home now. So my older son and he was driving. I was a mess. I couldn't drive. I was shaking uncontrollably at this moment. And we drove up a hill to one of our more main streets in our town. And all of a sudden, my older son, who was driving the car, said, there he is. There he is. And I looked, and my son was laying in the middle of the road at this point, and cars were stopping. And my son pulled, I think just panic mode kind of set in, and we wanted to keep him safe. So my older son stopped the car. I called the police to tell them we had located him. My older son started to approach my son. Once I got off the phone with the police, I went over by my son, and once he kind of recognized that it was us, it all started all over again. And he
Wow.
threw me to the ground, hit me, punched me in the stomach. He was kicking me, all this stuff, until the police finally approached. And of course, they took him into custody at that time.
The
More
police
so,
were there when he was
the
doing
police
that.
got there. He was doing all this to me as the police were arriving.
And
So the
I
police saw
put
it.
it sorry, I put in this comment just for context. When you were looking for him,
Mhm.
Brittany shares that she believes she had his phone at that point, so there was no way to track him through
Yes,
that either.
and yes, and
Brittany being Dawn's daughter.
yes, and yes, um, yes. So we couldn't track him, and he had, we had the one rule that you can have a phone, but we have to be able to track you
Yeah,
because of things that were going on. But of course, he was smart enough to know how to get all that turned off, and
sure.
so we had that. So the police took him into custody, and at that moment, like, I just remember people being all around, but I couldn't tell who anybody was. And I could hear voices, but I couldn't really hear what anybody was saying. And everything just kind of seemed like blurry because I was like, what literally is happening to my day? And is my son okay? I just wanted to know that my son was okay. And the police then approached me and asked me if I wanted to press charges on my son.
And
And
you, sorry, go ahead.
I just I think I don't even know if I cried. I said, No, I just want to know he's okay." Um, and I'm sorry, Neil, you were going to ask something?
No, I'm sorry to interrupt. It was
Yeah.
just my mom says that you must have gone through a very difficult time, and she appreciates your tolerance and strength.
Thanks.
I think she speaks for all of us. For what you went through and the fact that you can share it now with a broader audience, I think is very meaningful. I was actually going to read back some of what you wrote because you talk about the physical. Uh, Impact, the injuries, but
Mhm,
in your blog post you write the pain of the physical injuries was eclipsed by the agony of betrayal, the
mhm,
disbelief that someone I loved with all my heart could inflict such harm upon me. And
yeah,
that's when that quote, but amidst the chaos and the pain there was a glimmer of clarity. My son was not himself. He was a prisoner of his
yeah,
own mind, controlled by forces beyond his control.
yeah,
It was the verbal abuse. You talked about that. The verbal abuse that he gave you
mhm,
cut deeper than any wound ever could.
right.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm his mom. Like physical wounds will heal, but those words, this is a young child that um I love with all my heart and soul. I mean, his personality was so much of my personality. I saw so much of myself in him. Um, and I always felt really connected with him when he was really younger and when he was younger. And I just simply could not understand how somebody that I cared about could be saying such terrible things. And they weren't even like necessarily making sense, the things that he was saying. But for some reason, I think the other part that really hurt with it is it was all directed towards me.
Yeah.
And I think in time, as we've healed through this, um, he, I think he trusted me. Like I was his rock, regardless of all the stuff we were going through. He didn't like that I was asking him questions. He didn't like that we were going to therapy. He didn't like that we were trying to get help and trying medications and talking to school and doing all these things. But he always knew I would be there for him, whether it was him kicking me, hitting me, verbally abusing me. He did end up in the hospital, and we were right there by his side. No matter what he did, we were there. And so, but I do think that the words he said hurt deeper than anything else. Yeah.
Rose is watching on a train in Connecticut, going from Grand Central Station in New York on the Metro North. So thank you, Rose. I appreciate you tuning in. But it really wasn't until she put in this comment that I kind of certainly the synapses started firing, and I realized that Sunday is Mother's Day.
Mhm.
This entire episode, I mean, we could have framed it very differently in terms of what you go through as a mom. Um, and Pradnya is saying moms get the best and the worst of our
Yep.
children. Um, Another mom that I'd like to bring in, Dawn. Um, I'm just going to sit back and let you both share, and also kind of be in this moment. This makes, I mean, motherhood is hard, but this is a different level. This is something different.
Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of close this like triangular circle that some of you are most certainly not aware of. But so Kate is my best friend, but Kate was not my best friend when all of this was happening. I didn't really know Kate when all of this was happening, but her son was dating my daughter. And you see Brittany's little hearts there.
Mhm.
Um, her son was dating my daughter at the time, and I think one of the bravest things that a human can do is reach out to someone and say, I want to talk to you because I know my son um is doing some things that are uncomfortable and not wonderful, and I want you to know that I'm concerned. And that's what she did. She reached out to me. She asked me if we could get coffee, and she explained the situation to me, which I thought was so incredibly commendable. And her son and my daughter stopped dating, and her and I became the best of friends. Um, and in the meantime, I was also having, had a son who had some really difficult challenges, and who was very isolated, and who didn't want to talk, and who locked himself in his room, and who spent a lot of time in a fetal position on the ground, just in agony with inside himself. So I think we had some of that commonality, that we could kind of work through things together, or not even work through. Sometimes it was just like, I don't know what to do. And that was really beneficial, I think, for both of us to have that relationship in our lives.
Absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. Rochelle says that your courageous love for your son shines through your story, and applies to both of you. Rose, who I know is, I mean, just as I know some of the people watching, right? I know Rochelle has 3 kids. We're going to meet her. We're also going to meet her daughter later in the year, but she has 2 sons. Rose has I think 2 sons as well. Rose, sorry for if you can correct me, but she says there's no roadmap to being a mom or a dad. You can't control what may happen as your children grow up. Um, and these are just very powerful. My sister is watching from Washington State. She also has a son, much younger, um, but still, this is all stuff that cuts very close to home.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, and then I'm going to ask you a question, Kate, but I
Mhm.
think you can totally relate to this. With Brittany being in, on the show, listening to the show today, this has such a ripple effect. It is not it Yes, it's very painful for the mom, but it affects the siblings, it affects friends, it affects family members, it affects relationships. So what we are talking about today really has that ripple effect. And so, Kate, I just wanted to ask you, like, how do you think, like, Tyler, your other
Mhm.
son, was able to like process this and cope with this, seeing that his brother had just hit his mom and was being verbally abusive?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. So my older son, he's 3 years older than my younger son. Um, he became very protective of me, actually, and didn't want me to be in the house alone with my other son. So he kind of assumed that parenting role a little bit, like protecting me. I think also what interestingly happened with Tyler is he didn't he protected me, but he didn't really want to know what was going on. He didn't want to know when there was a diagnosis. He didn't want to know when we were going to therapy, or what was going on. He just didn't want to know the details. And then he left for college, and I'd tell him, Matthew's having a hard time. We're not connecting with him again. And he would just change the topic. And he didn't really, it was very hard for him. However, now that Matthew's much healthier, they have a pretty close not close like, Dawn, your kids are really close. My kids are close, but in a very different way. They'll now call each other now and then. They'll visit each other. They'll ask a little bit about each other. But, so not only did it affect him, but it affected, just us as a family. I talked to Dawn about this before my family. As a matter of fact, it was a week ago that I had a meal with my mom, and I told the whole story. She had heard bits and pieces. I was working through this with my son, and I knew this was not just parenting. Yes, there's always things that I can do different, but I knew what was going on. And that's kind of what I talked about in my blog post. Like, there was something in this child that he couldn't control, and we as parents couldn't control. And so I stayed away from telling my family, because I didn't want them treating him any differently.
Kate, Apollo has a really great question. He was referring to your quote, "prison of his mind," was a great phrase.
Mhm.
He's asking, was there any psychiatric presence? Can you talk a little bit about the care that you were able to find for your son eventually,
Yeah.
and Dawn, you as well, because this is an important part
Mhm.
of both of your stories, both in terms of the challenges of getting the care, but then once you did get care, what role did that play?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that question, because my son was taking medications for like some attention deficit things and some depression things. And we kind of thought this behavior was more related to that. And after the incident, the big incident, the day that I kind of hit rock bottom, we had a search for psychologists and psychiatrists. I remember in the hospital, I had a social worker hand me a pamphlet and said, you can call these people if there's an emergency. But I remember feeling a relief when he was in the hospital, hoping this is it. This is the door open. They're going to help him. And that was not the case. Accessing services for him, getting counseling and a counselor and then a psychiatrist was months and months and months in the making. But once he did, as Dawn and I have often talked about, the psychiatrist isn't a great connection, but he sure knows his medications. And once my son was on the correct medication, that's really when the healing began.
And when her son when she found a psychiatrist for her son, she introduced me to that individual, and I was able to get services from that same provider for my son. That's how difficult it was to find the help that we needed. And as Kate very kindly said, he is not a therapist. He is not a psychologist. He isn't there to give advice. He literally does a 15-minute med check every 3 months. And half the time, he's not really sure who he's talking to, except for what he can read in the notes, and just will continue to monitor the medication. But it's a lifesaver for those kids. Like it certainly, I know for my son who says he would not be who he is without that monitored medication.
Mhm.
And I know earlier when you mentioned getting help, it was a 9-month wait before you could find care. And Deborah made a comment about that earlier, that we need mental health parity, more psychiatrists, and higher reimbursements. It's a problem with the medical system, the healthcare system in general. The waits are incredible. I do want to bring in a comment. Ship Crystal is watching on your Facebook page, Dawn, and she's
Mhm.
sending love. They're sending love. If you know Ship, you can certainly give them a shout out. Dawn Jody is also watching. Accessing services extremely hard. There aren't people to help you connect the dots, which certainly you need that kind of advocate. You need someone to help you navigate the healthcare system.
And
Um,
Dawn is a 50-year friend of mine. I've known her since I was a baby. She's my absolute best friend in the entire world, and I'm giving you all the love in the world, my friend.
that means a lot. That means a lot to have someone in your life for that long. My sister earlier agreed. You mentioned the ripple effect, the impact on families, and she agrees that it's very real and very difficult. And I'd be remiss if I didn't work in Jim's comment earlier, Kate, when he said, "Thank you for sharing and that you are doing great." And he's saying that from right upstairs. If you look up through your roof, your ceiling, you'll with your X-ray vision, you'll see him. If
Thanks,
folks
Jim.
missed the reference earlier, Dawn and Jim are engaged. He's a former guest on the show. They live upstairs. Kate is their landlady, and lives downstairs. So we have when they're watching, we have 3 people at the same address, all engaged with the show, which is always
Mhm.
great. And Alexis is watching. Alexis Randa, saying in reference to the healthcare, that's unacceptable to be in the hospital
Mhm.
after things getting that far, and the staff or insurance providers not being able to immediately find someone for you both to talk to immediately. That is difficult. Alexis is watching on your page, Dawn, as well. Thank you, Alexis. Thank you for watching. As we mentioned earlier, um, Shining Light on Shadows is a show. It's a candid conversation about mental health. Dawn and I started this show back in February. We are on the second and fourth Thursdays of every month on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and my website. Speaking of Instagram, my friend Tim Sohn said hi earlier, tuning in from Pennsylvania. And I hate doing this. I hate having to look off camera, but I have 2 computers here. I can try and move this a little bit closer, but I do want to bring in a comment. Sean Dove, who is alumni of Wesleyan University, where I went to school, and also someone that I connected with through United Way. Dawn, if you happen to know the folks in Metro United Way in Louisville, they've done a lot of work around black male achievement. And Sean and I'm blanking on the guy's name who left now. He's with the Boys and Girls Club now, but they presented several times, and I supported their work. Sean says, "Thank you so much for sharing your stories. How, as parents, did you deal with the shame and blame that inevitably comes with a child that is struggling with mental health challenges?" That's a great question. How did you deal with the shame and blame? Um, Dawn or Kate, which one would like to jump on this first?
I mean, for me, it it wasn't easy. You know, at that time, my son, we was still involved with some sports teams, and I just kind of became silent. I like to talk. I like to interact with people. Um, and I found myself just being kind of silenced. I just wanted to go do what we needed to do and leave because I didn't want to have to answer any questions. Um, and really, I mean, Dawn was the first person that I like opened up to, and she was really the one that knew the story. So for me, it was having a friend that believed me and accepted me for the things that was going that were happening. And I will never forget when I was in my dark places, or she'd tell me, hey, your son did this, your son did that. I'm like, I don't know what to do. And she said, you're the best parent you can be, at that moment. And that's the words I needed to hear was, it's not you, you're a good parent. And to me, those were the most comforting words. And I didn't have many people that could say that, because people didn't understand what was going on. And they thought I was just letting my son run willy-nilly doing all these things. And that wasn't the case.
And I'll say, like, for me, our situation was very hidden. Clayton had social anxiety, so he didn't belong to sports clubs. He was in Boy Scouts, and that was it. He was also a very good student. In my blog, I say, he faked it until he made it. He didn't lash out at school. He didn't have behavior problems at school. The majority of the things that happened with him happened inside our house. And it was really just retreating, isolating, not communicating, not talking, not knowing how to say what he needed or how he needed it. So there wasn't a lot of shame and blame in my situation in comparison to Kate's. That was like literally her son laying on the ground in the village of Wauwatosa, which is like literally the heart of the town that she lives in, with people that she knew, that she was in soccer with. That had to be so frightening. Well, I know it was very frightening and scary and sad and very isolating for her as well.
So we have a comment from Tiffany saying hello from Wauwatosa. Did you lose any friends during this time?
Personally, I did. There was a lot of people. We lost a lot of friends. As a matter of fact, there's a young man that my son is currently living with in Madison, and they have been very, very close friends since kindergarten. And we used to connect with the parents all the time. And ever since this incident happened, they have never spoken to us again. They've never spoken to us again, never wanted to try to understand, just, and we have several people like that. Our social circle really diminished, and family too, because life was so unpredictable. I live by the quote, the only predictability I had in my life was that something was unpredictable.
Hmm.
And you never knew what child you were bringing to family functions. You never knew how long you'd be able to stay. You'd never know what the outburst was. I'd never know what my reaction was. So my reaction at that time was to just not go. And so we became very isolated and just really didn't do a whole lot. And we did. Yes, we lost a lot of friends.
And while we have Tiffany's comment on screen, I want to let folks know about our next episode coming up May 23rd, 2 weeks from today. Our guest will be Tiffany Westerfield. She is, we're going to be talking about, most likely talking about the stigma around mental health, and really raising that question: is there still a stigma? I've heard different things, frankly, from folks. So we will explore that and other issues on May 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific. Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us and watching today's episode. We have several other great comments coming in. I'll just bring those in, and then we'll go into some of the stats that we want to share with this episode, and we will still try and wrap up in about 10 minutes. We try and keep these shows right to the hour. Dawn says, becoming silent, Dawn Jody, becoming silent and isolated in general is a huge secondary issue for the parent. I'm seeing lots of head nods, and I'm assuming there are virtual head nods out there as well. And we have one more comment I want to bring in. Let's see. Deborah Bernick is saying siblings want to be sheltered from the extreme behavior. Kate, you were talking about how your two sons, how your other son kind of reacted to this, but they know that they may have greater responsibilities long term after parents
Yeah.
pass. And before I turn it back to you, Alexis says you're a great mom, and that
Yeah.
goes to both you and Dawn, certainly. Kate, was there something else you wanted to add?
I just, because we were kind of talking about like the effects on family, I think as we're kind of wrapping up this, I think it's really an important thing to share is my son and I have formed a very close relationship through all this. Again, do we talk about this? No, because I think there's so much of it he doesn't even remember. He doesn't even know because he wasn't himself. But I've also have my own challenges with mental health, and I was working with a therapist, and the therapist gave me a diagnosis, and it was really hard on me. It was really personal and really hard on me. And I needed to talk to somebody like right away. And the first person I called was my son.
Oh.
And he said, "It's okay, Mom. You're the same person today that you were yesterday without the diagnosis." So it's amazing how the right treatment, the right supports, him maturing really, it is just really impactful. So I'm grateful for some of the life lessons he has taught me.
And this is your son from graduation a couple years
Yep,
ago.
we made it.
And obviously, you're talking about how that day, which had so much trauma associated, was rock bottom, but it was really just the beginning of your story. Your story is
Mhm.
continuing, of course, but
Yes.
it's always nice to see, you know, how this progresses, and that there is that evolution. It's not to say that there won't be difficult times in the future, but it really is nice to see how close a relationship you've developed with
I'm
your
going to
son.
make one last comment, Neil, before
Please,
you show
please,
the
Don.
stats.
Sure.
I'm just going to say, because I think that this is really, really, really critical, that these kids are amazing, amazing kids. They
Mhm.
are wonderful, brilliant, loving, compassionate, special kids
Absolutely.
who are struggling and need help finding their way. And I need to say that because I know Matthew, and he's a great kid, and I just think that that's just so important, that just because these kids can be difficult to raise at times doesn't mean that their inner core is not a complete shining light. And my son's just an incredible kid. Both my kids are incredible kids. So I just had to say that.
Absolutely. And I think that, Apollo really sums it up well. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms,
Mhm.
and everyone who is, struggling with some of these. Some of these issues. I want to just acknowledge some of the folks watching on Instagram. Uh, Thank you for watching. Jenny Lazarus, another colleague of mine from Digimentors. Um, Dana, another Digimentors colleagues, Mary Santangelo. Anna Fuel, another high school friend of mine who lived just behind my house on Nichols Drive. Thank you, Anna, for watching. And it means so much when we have people log on from different places and watch on different platforms. Um, we always want to show some stats according that are related to the episode. Dawn is a researcher and a stats person for United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County. So she put some work together The National Alliance on Mental Illness, 1 in 6 U.S. youth aged 6 to 17 experience a mental health disorder each year. 1 in 6. And 50% of all lifetime mental illness begins by age 14. Just around the age, I think, Dawn, your son was a little younger, right? And Kate, your son was just around 14 as well.
Yep.
Dawn, what about these stats? And Alexis is just can't believe what they're hearing. Can you share the stats you found from the CDC?
Yeah, these are a little bit older, but I had to put them up there because I think they ring very true that more than 4 in 10 students felt persistently sad or hopeless, and nearly 1/3 experienced poor mental health. And this is from the Youth Risk Behavioral Survey that's taken inside schools every year. More than 1 in 5, or 22% of students, seriously consider attempting suicide, and 1 in 10, which is 10%, actually attempt suicide. And those are startling, just startling, but something we need to be aware of.
And as I mentioned earlier, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. My quip earlier is that for us, every month is Mental Health Awareness Month. That's what we're trying to do with this show. And some of the standard data we share: 1 in 5 adults suffer or have suffered from mental illness at some point in time. That's 1 in 5 adults. And whenever we show this stat, we also want to make sure people know about the resources at the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the NAMI helpline, 800-950-6264. Again, 1-800-950-6264. If you or anyone else in your family is struggling with a mental health challenge, please do not hesitate to reach out to them. You can also go to their website, NAMI.org, NAMI.org. We also share some stats from Mental Health America. There, you can go to MHAnational.org. That's their website, or 988lifeline.org. One of the stats that jump out to me, this is dealing with adults, but 18% of adults have a mental health condition. That's over 43 million Americans. 43 million Americans, and 9.6 million experience suicidal ideation, which is what you were talking about earlier, Dawn. So we want to make sure folks are aware of that. And then finally, because both Dawn and I are survivors of sexual abuse and trauma, and we've talked about this on the show, sorry for not giving people a heads up before mentioning that. But we also always show the resources from RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. Every 68 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. So we want to make sure folks know about that. April, which we just finished, of course, was Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So there are a number of events and number of forums about that. And Denim Day, of course, which Dawn has been a part of for a number of years, and how we first connected. Another incredible conversation, Dawn and Kate. Thank you so much. And as we were sharing some of those stats, comments just blew up. We have so many people who are still commenting. So I'm going to try and run through these fairly quickly so we can try and finish on time. But Dawn, when you were giving your plea about how the kids are really great, that they're really wonderful kids, Deborah said it was a great message. These kids are so often bright and creative. Many noted artists have had mental health challenges. Rochelle, who worked in a school system for a number of years as a psychologist, mental health diagnoses present continuing challenges throughout a lifetime and require that same love and flexible parenting that you are modeling. Thank you for sharing your story. Happy Mother's Day. Being a mom is the toughest but most rewarding job of all. And Rochelle, again, thank you so much. Rochelle is going to be on our show in September to share some of her story related to these issues around being a mom, and also her own mental health challenges. Pradnya, kids are more self-aware than we ever were about what they are experiencing. And I'm flabbergasted. One of our upcoming guests in June is going to be Sarah Wilson, a colleague of mine from United Way of Snohomish County. She left United Way to go into therapy. She has told me that she mostly sees high school and young women, uh, and they share tips from their therapists around the lunch table in the cafeteria, like you would share beauty tips. That so and so,
Mhm.
I saw my therapist and they said blah blah blah. Oh yeah, someone else would go. Yeah, well, my therapist said this. Maybe,
Mhm.
like I could never imagine that that could be a conversation people would have. Um, Jim says another amazing show, maybe our best yet. Secret. He says that every show. He says that every time. No, he is great though. Um, my aunt Molly is watching and says, "Great job as always, Molly. Thank you so much. It means so much for your support and for you to watch. You know how much I love you, how close we are. Thank you." Pradnya is tagging a colleague of hers, Nicole, who might be interested. And Debbie is saying we should reach out to NAMI of Northern Virginia about the show. We certainly will. Uh, and Amy agrees with Jim that this is one of our best shows yet. And now Alexis says, I love that. And Dane says, great show. Thank you for sharing, Kate. So I can only hope that Kate, Dawn has been doing this now for several episodes, but Kate, I'm hoping that you can feel the love, that you can feel the support, that sharing your story is worth it. Sean Dove on Instagram says, thanks so much for amplifying the amazingness of our children as they struggle with their mental health challenges. So important. Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for being with us, Kate. Thank you for so much for sharing your story. I'm wishing you, Dawn, all the other moms watching a happy Mother's Day. And this just, being a mother is hard anyway. This puts it in so much more stark relief. And my love goes out to both of you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Kate.
Thank you, guys.
We'll see you in 2 weeks, May 23rd, for another episode of Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. See you then. Bye-bye.